Hi, welcome to AP World History with Mrs. Anderson. This is the first set of notes for Ways of the World, a brief global history with sources, the fourth edition. Make sure that your heading is in the top right-hand corner. Your topic is right there on the top line in the middle, and we'll get started. All right. The Hadza of Tanzania are one of the last gathering and hunting societies on Earth. And unfortunately, they're likely to disappear soon, and it will mark the end of what was universal human existence until about 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. For 95% of human history, the means of life was gathering and hunting. That means food collection, not food production. And this has been labeled the Paleolithic or Old Stone Age era. About 12,000 years ago, there was a new shift in Eurasia, Africa, and the Americas. And it was deliberate cultivation of plants and domestication of animals. And this is known as the agricultural or Neolithic Revolution. And the implications are there for every aspect of human life. The Paleolithic and Neolithic periods represent all but about the last 5,500 years of human history. Now, history courses often neglect Neolithic and Paleolithic periods. The argument is that the earlier periods are largely unknowable. The pace of change was relatively slow, and there's little significance to what happened. But it's wrong to ignore the first 200,000 years of human existence. The achievements of the Paleolithic peoples are very important. They settled the planet and created the first or earliest human societies. And they were the first to reflect on the issues of life and death. Also, the achievements of Neolithic peoples are very important. Agriculture is arguably the most profound transformation of human life in all of human history. So let's start off with some Paleolithic art. The rock art of gathering and hunting peoples has been found in Africa, Europe, Australia, and elsewhere. This image from the San people of southern Africa represents aspects of their outer life in the form of wild animals and hunters with bows, as well as the inner life of their shamans during a trance. And that's reflected in the elongated figures with both human and animal features. So let's stop and think for a moment. What do you think is the purpose of this art, and what does it convey about the lives of the people who created it? Well, the art represents both the inner and outer life of the people who created it, giving meaning and shape to their existence. It conveys the close association of the hunter-gatherer society's way of life with the wild animals of their environment. And this is visible through the art's depiction of hunting and the animal features with the human figures as well. So let's start with First Peoples, First Farmers. Most of history in a single chapter to 3500 BCE. All right, we're going to look at this map first, the global dispersion of humankind. With origins in Africa, perhaps 250,000 years ago, members of our species, Homo sapiens, have migrated to every environmental setting on the planet over the past 100,000 years. So let's trace the routes of human migration and settlement from the point where our species first left Africa. In what order were the regions of the world settled, and how long did it take for that settlement to unfold? And think about maybe identifying those regions where humans settled last. What geographic factors may have delayed the settlement of these regions? Those are some things to think about. All right, let's start with out of Africa, first migrations. Okay, so into Eurasia, that's where we're going to start. Humans started migrating into the Middle East around 45,000 years ago. And the best evidence of early European settlement comes from southern France and northern Spain. They developed new hunting habits and new hunting technologies. Now, the earliest Europeans left hundreds of cave paintings, depictions of animals and humans and abstract designs. And that dates to about 35,000 to 17,000 years ago. And the development of new technologies in Ukraine and Russia are things like needles, multi-layered clothing, weaving nets, storage pits, baskets, pottery, and partially underground dwellings have been found here made from mammoth remains. And this suggests a semi-permanent settlement. And we've even found creation and seen creation of female figurines known as Venus figurines. And the earliest dated at about 35,000 years ago. Excuse me. All right, into Australia. Now, humans reached Australia about 60,000 years ago from Indonesia. It's a very sparse settlement, estimated maybe 300,000 people in 1788 when some of the first Europeans arrived. And they developed some 250 languages in Australia. So not only was it a sparse settlement, but it was quite diverse. And it's still completely a gathering and hunting economy until when those Europeans arrived in 1788. And these natives developed a complex worldview, and it's known as the dream time. It consists of stories, ceremonies, and art that tell of ancestral beings. Everything in the natural order is an echo of ancient happenings. And the current people are intimately related to places and events from the past. And the major communication and exchange networks included stones, pigments, wood, and patchouli, or a psychoactive drug. And it also included songs, dances, stories, and rituals. So it's about that connection for current people and their relation to events in the past. And here's an example of some Australian rock art, and it's known as the rainbow serpent. It's associated with creation, fertility, the social harmony, and the rainbow serpent has figured prominently in Australian Aboriginal mythology and in its rock art. There's a story associated with the rainbow serpent in your Working with Evidence in Chapter 1, and the source is 1.2. All right, into the Americas. When settlement of the Americas began, is still argued over somewhere between 30,000 and 15,000 years ago. And the mode of migration is generally agreed upon to be the Bering Strait or by sea down the west coast of North America. But this is also still a significant point of argumentation amongst historians. However, many migrations and how long they took is also a big topic. But there is evidence of humans in southern Chile by about 12,500 years ago. Clovis is the first clearly defined and widespread culture of the Americas. And the name comes from the Clovis Point, which is a kind of projectile point that's been found near Clovis. And it flourished briefly around 13,000 years ago. They hunted large mammals, particularly mammoths and bison. They disappeared at the same time as the extinction of a number of large mammals around 11,000 years ago. And the next stage was a much greater cultural diversity as people adapted to the end of the Ice Age in many different ways. All right, into the Pacific. The last phase of the Great Human Migration is into the Pacific, and it started circa 3,500 years ago. This migration is by water from the Bismarck and Solomon Islands and the Philippines. And it's very quick waterborne migration, but it was over very long distances. Migrants spoke Austronesian languages, which can be traced to southern China. And they settled every habitable area of the Pacific Basin within 2,500 years, which is pretty phenomenal, considering the number of islands within the Pacific. They also settled the island of Madagascar, which is off the eastern coast of Africa. And it made Austronesian the most widespread language family because of those migrations. And this completed the initial human settlement of the world circa 1000 to 1300 CE with the occupation of New Zealand. And some of the Pacific settlers took agriculture with them, unlike many of the other migrants. Apparently, they followed a deliberate colonization plan, and they created highly stratified societies or chiefdoms. A great example is Hawaii. And there's a massive environmental impact on the previous uninhabited lands because of those new patterns of settlement. So let's take a look at this map. This is the migration of those Austronesian-speaking peoples. People speak the Austronesian languages. They completed the human settlement of the earth quite recently as they settled the islands of the vast Pacific and penetrated the Indian Ocean and Madagascar, like I mentioned earlier. So when you look at this, think about a couple of things. How could the migration patterns shown on this map lead to cultural diffusion? As they traveled to these islands, these migrating peoples brought along with them their domesticated plants and animals. They probably brought agricultural techniques, languages, and even their social structures. Now, how did the Austronesian migrations differ from the other early patterns of human movement? Well, they occurred quite recently, like I said, beginning only about 3,500 years ago. And they were waterborne migrations, making use of ocean-going canoes, and that represents remarkable navigational skills. They happened very quickly over the course of about 2,500 years and over a huge area of the planet. You could see, even though in this box here, if you look up in the top right-hand corner, in the red rectangular box, that's the portion of the Earth that this map is showing. So you could tell that's an extremely large portion of the planet. And unlike the other migrations, they were undertaken by people with the agricultural technology who carried both domesticated plants and animals in those canoes. All right, guys, that concludes the first section of notes out of Africa in the first migrations. Remember, you want to write down everything that you've heard that goes along with the bullet points from the notes on the slides that you saw. So the good, meaty portion parts, the historical parts of the lesson, that's what you hear. All right, so if you just write down the bare bones bullet points, you're going to miss a lot of that good content. All right, I'll see you guys next time.